we're gonna get started. My name is Samantha Hendricks. I'm the event coordinator here for Schuler Books and Nicola's Books. We have 3 locations in Michigan: Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor, where Nicola's Books is, and Lansing or Okemos. You can find us online as well, and all of our stores are open. You can do curbside pickup. We can ship worldwide, whatever you need. So if you missed it, I did drop a link in the chat for Schuler Books for City of Shattered Light. Please go and grab your copy, grab your Christmas copies, and all of the copies. They are signed. Claire stopped by, and she'll come sign more, right, Claire? So if you run out, it's not a problem. Don't worry about it. You can buy them all. So without further ado, I'm going to get us started, and I'm going to stop talking because we're not here for me. Tonight we have Claire Winn in conversation with Rebecca Coffindaffer. Is that correct?
Nice job. Nailed it.
Nervous for a second. So I'm going to introduce Claire, who spends her time immersed in other worlds through LARP, video games, books, nerd conventions, and her own stories. Since graduating from Northwestern University, she worked as a legal writer and freelance editor. Aside from writing, she builds cosplay props and armor, tears up dance floors, and battles with Boffer swords.
Boffer swords. They're like foam lined swords that you use for LARPing, so you can whack people with them and not hurt them.
I feel like I need that for my kids. City of Shattered Light's birthday is today, and it is her first novel. Yay! Thanks for joining us, Claire.
Thank you for having me. And thank you, Becca, for showing up and talking to me about stuff.
Rebecca Coffindaffer grew up on Star Wars, Star Trek, other fantasy like movies, and even more fantasy like books. They waited a long time for their secret elemental powers to develop, and in the interim, they started writing stories about magic and politics, spaceships, far-off worlds, and people walking away from explosions in very slow motion. These days, they live in Kansas with their family, surrounded by a lot of books and a lot of tabletop games and one big fuzzy dog. They're the author of the YA space opera duology, Crownchasers, out now from Harper Teen. Woohoo! All right, I am going to disappear. I'll let you guys talk. Please, everybody, if you have hard-pressing questions for Claire or fun questions, whatever you feel like you want to do tonight, please drop them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. All right,
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Samantha. Claire, happy debut day. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much.
Yes, every time a YA sci-fi, especially a queer YA sci-fi, joins the canon, I feel like my heart grows 3 sizes. So I sat down to write questions and came up with like 12,000 of them. So I'm going to dive right into it. And I think the first question is sort of standard, but I am just very curious, like what was the inspiration, the initial spark behind City of Shattered Light?
So I didn't initially consider myself a sci-fi author. I was writing fantasy before that, and it was really difficult after my first one didn't get picked up by an agent to start anything new, and I was having trouble with new fantasy worlds because I kept feeling like I was treading on the world building for my other book. And then I was just having other ideas that were coalescing when I wasn't stressing myself out, thinking about like, what story can I put together next. And the first image that really came to me for this book was the idea of a girl on the run in this rickety transit ship. I thought she was like some kind of runaway galactic princess. She had an alien heart beating in her backpack, and she was concealing her identity. And I was like, okay, who is she? What's her story? And I was thinking more and more about like, it's her sister, but who did this to her sister? What happened here? And the ideas were all pretty awful. And I kind of worked backward from there. Riven was Lady Doc Holliday in space. I wanted her to be kind of like a counterweight to Asa. She's very different, obviously. She's the brawn and the muscle and very hot-headed compared to Asa's more calculating and naive. And that together was that did how so many things in the future are going to have circuit boards, and you'll be able to hack almost anything. So I thinking about how that could wreak havoc and what would be the most interesting situation for such a villain to wreak havoc, and that would be a city that was more isolated, and the plot kind of went from there.
That's awesome. Like, I love how it started with such a specific image, that's so evocative, because just breaking that down, just that one image of Asa is just really sort of alive already with possibilities. So that's really amazing. Because I think one of the real strengths of City of Shattered Light was this vivid world building. And I'm going to probably say vivid a lot because it just feels like a very good word for this book. But like, how did you go about creating this city that both is so dangerous, but also I kind of want to visit? Like, I would not survive, but I do kind of want to see it. So how did you go about sort of structuring it and coming up with, I'm going to tread carefully so I don't spoil it, but like all the different places that they go to, like the club and the grav spheres and all of that stuff?
So the world was a big piece of my brainstorming process. And before I was thinking too much about where the character arcs would go, I would write down like little bits and snippets of what do I want in this world. And a lot of the inspiration for the aesthetics came from like video games and old movies and anime. And I really liked the idea of a place that was at the same time dangerous, but also fascinating. And the idea that, okay, this place was once like a tourist destination, but now it's overrun by gangs. I wanted to try to strike that balance. And so it was a lot of brainstorming about the world before I even put the plot together. And I also was thinking about crime syndicates, and I was like, okay, what kind of characters would populate this world? And I wanted them all to be female. I was like, I can't make them all female, or can I? And then that went from there. It became matriarchal crime syndicates, and I had to think about like how that tied into the world's history. And yeah, that was one of the most fun things. Also music, synthwave music, Scandroid, Blue Stally, Dance with the Dead, Carpenter Brute. A lot of music helps me nail the tone of the scene. And that was a big part of my drafting process too.
Nice. I definitely feel like you did it like that. Yeah. Like, even as we're going through this and Asa sitting there going like, I'm going to die here. I'm like, yeah, we might, but it's fun. So just, we're staying. So yeah, that was really kind of cool. There was something you said and it sparked a question. Of course, now I lost it because I got stuck on matriarchs. I'll have to come back to it. So what would you say was sort of the roughest part of writing this book versus kind of the easiest part? Like, which part kind of flowed more smoothly and which part was like blood on the keyboard?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I intended to make this book a lot simpler than it ended up being. I was like, it's going to be really straightforward. It's going to be like simple YA plot. And obviously there's a lot of threads and there's so many characters. It got kind of complicated. But what was difficult for me was that this was kind of a book that forced me to unlearn how to write and then relearn how to write in between. The first book I'd written without much knowledge of the publishing industry. And this was the second book I wrote. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it right this time. I didn't know how to do it right. And the first query I ever sent was to the agent who would become my agent. And she pretty quickly replied with a revise and resubmit. So for people who aren't familiar with the publishing industry, generally an agent is who will pitch your book to publishers, and an agent will sift through lots of queries and manuscripts before deciding whether to offer you representation. If they offer you a revise and resubmit, that means that they see a lot of potential and they see some room for big changes, but they're just not sure if those changes can be done. So my agent had requested some pretty big changes, and that included digging much deeper into Asa's arc. And actually the story had originally started with Asa on that transit ship. And I was like, okay, no matter how artful I talk about what got her to this point in the narrative, I still need to go back because it still feels like info dumping. So basically digging in and rebuilding her character from the ground up was difficult, but I think it ultimately paid off.
Yeah, I think so too. I think she really I think it's a lot more impactful when she gets to Requiem to really have that sense of where she came from, because then the juxtaposition works so well of like, this is the place I came from. It's like high-tech Connecticut. It's super nice and like, you know, like super, yeah, it's like, I always think of Connecticut because I know like the richest town in America is there, but like versus then getting sort of down into this world where it's like, you know, not having a cybernetic implant is amazing. So I remembered my question because you were talking about sort of images and the influences, and I was curious because tropes are sort of losing their dirty word status and people are like embracing tropes. What are your favorite tropes that you were like, this is going in the book?
Obviously Found Family is my favorite, and I think that's probably going to be showing up in every book that I ever write. And that was a lot of fun to write in City of Shattered Light. It's just, I knew I wanted a full crew of characters that I could develop in their own ways. Because when you have a faster paced plot, it's kind of fun to have everyone with their own role, everyone interacting in different ways and in different scenarios as everything spirals out of control. So Found Family is definitely a favorite. Enemies to Lovers is fun in romance. I'm not really a romance heavy writer, but I always like it when main characters kind of start off at odds and learn to trust each other. And I'm trying to think of a specific trope. I think that those are the main ones.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I Found Family in particular, and I was going to gush about this at some point. I knew it was going to come up that the secondary characters, you did a great job, like making me love them just as much as sort of the main trio, like Samir and Diego are my babies. I love them so much. So that I think was an amazing job. Even Galateo, I was just like, yes, come to me, my crazy sci-fi babies. Something else that, and I did that thing where I lost my question again. All right, we're gonna move on because I actually have written stuff down. We've got plenty of stuff to cover. The next thing I wanted to actually ask is that you LARP and I also cosplay, right? You did cosplay at conventions. LARPing in particular, as somebody who has never LARPed but always kind of wanted to, I will. I'm gonna come up. How did LARPing impact?
I'm going to mute real quick here.
Yeah. How did LARPing impact how you tell stories? How did it impact maybe the stories you tell?
I think that LARP, I'm sorry, it gets kind of loud every once in a while, but
I don't really hear it that much, so you're fine.
Great. So LARPing has been really interesting because it teaches you a lot about yourself and your friends and the character you're immersing yourself in like high pressure situations. And it's so tempting when you're writing a book to take your main character and just throw them a softball and say like, oh, you can get out of this pretty easily and look cool doing it. But when you're immersed in a game and you have a character you're invested in, I know that you're probably familiar with this because you've done like tabletop gaming and stuff.
Yes.
There's some situations where you're like, I have to make a decision on the spot. And I'm a little bit surprised at what I do and what I choose and the options before me. And that's been really helpful in thinking about how characters might make choices and what kind of situations you can put them in. And obviously also shenanigans everywhere. I have so many great people that I LARP with, and there's a bajillion quotable lines after every LARP event. And it's really helpful for thinking about casts of characters, in my opinion.
That's amazing. I can see how that would have definitely impacted all of these unique personalities that populate this book, because that experience must really lend to being able to sort of layer characters in very quick and decisive ways, you know, like a line of dialogue, one action here, and it tells you so much about who that character is. Yeah, I'm going to come up and LARP with you anytime.
Yes,
I mean,
definitely.
I'm like 38, so take it easy on me. I break easily, but
it does not matter. My partner's 38.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great age. I love my 30s. But also my back is a mess. Anyway, that's separate. What about what would you say in terms of, because you and I have talked video games before. I know how video games impact I write. How do you feel like it impacts you? I wanted to kind of talk about like those other methods of storytelling that I feel like can influence us almost as much as books, sometimes more than books, in some very specific ways. Did I lose you a little bit?
Yeah, sorry. I missed just the last half of that question.
No,
sorry.
that's okay. Just talking about those different sort of media forms that can really impact how we tell stories.
Mm-hmm. I would really like to hear your take on this too after I answer, because I'm really curious. But what I love about video games, especially like recent AAA titles, is that there is so much detail put into the environments and the storyline. Like if you have a big sprawling game, there's going to be more in there than a movie could ever conceivably pack in. And there's just so many teams of people dedicated to bringing the environment to life and bringing the characters to life in ways that just are mind blowing. And one thing I do that my partner makes fun of me for sometimes is I'll just sit there in front of a game screen and just listen to the background music and take in the ambience and just write in my notebook. And even if it's completely unrelated to the scene, it just feels like being there is sparking something to me. So I love looking at little details and how those help to bring an environment to life and how I could do something similar in a story. And another thing I love about video gaming is that the storytelling is a little less linear. So you get games like BioWare games where you have an ensemble cast, and it's so cool to see how they develop characters individually and thinking about, okay, how would I put this in a linear story? So I love video games. So I want to hear your take too, because
oh man, you went and turned the tables on me when I said I was only going to spotlight you.
You don't have to.
No, it's fine. No, I feel like personally there's a lot of different like video games, but also movies and television I think sometimes influence my storytelling even more than books. I love books. I've always loved books. I love to read. But like one of the things that when I was looking for an agent, one of the things I heard a lot is like, this is very cinematic. You write very cinematically. And I'm like, that's because I watch a lot of movies and I just write it that way, how I see it. So I'm a very visual person. I'm going to have to try that video game trick because I've never just done that before. And I think that would be really interesting to like stand, especially in something like Dragon Age Inquisition, and just stand and like, because those landscapes are just so gorgeous, and it really has that ambiance. I'm gonna have to try that trick because I think that would be interesting as a writing exercise. So let me see. If you take out science fiction and fantasy, because those are like, what would you say a favorite, like a third favorite genre, like in books or movies or video games? Like where do you think you might pull from beyond those two? It's hard because I pretty much just do sci-fi fantasy.
Is it what inspires me or what I enjoy? Personally?
Both. I both or either. Like what you like to watch, I guess, what you enjoy, and how maybe you think that might creep in to how you write.
Yeah, well, most of what I've consumed is sci-fi and fantasy recently, but I do sometimes enjoy like thrillers and heist movies and such. And it's kind of fun to see how those play out without speculative elements, because when you have a normal heist movie, you have to use only elements that your viewers are familiar with, only things that are in the real world, and you can't make stuff up and be like, oh, this is a cool, interesting obstacle. But you have to, I think there's a bit of an added pressure of using existing pieces of technology and the world in a new way. But yeah, those are interesting. I don't typically consume as much not sci-fi and fantasy media anymore, but it's one of them.
Yeah. You actually mentioned, and I picked up on this because I love Tombstone, and you called Riven Lady Doc Holliday, and I definitely picked up on those vibes. When did she sort of come in to the City of Shattered Light? Because I love the idea of this gender flipped Doc Holliday character. So when did she sort of enter the picture? Because you kind of started with, I'm going to say it wrong, Asa.
Oh, yeah. So Asa, she was my first spark of inspiration for the book. And Riven came pretty quickly afterward. I don't remember exactly when, but I knew that like she was kind of nebulous for a while. I knew that there was going to be another character who was kind of a counterweight to Asa. And I wanted someone who was kind of the polar opposite of her personality. And I think I had watched Tombstone fairly recently, and I had really liked a lot of the themes and the vibes in it. And it's got kind of like the badass found family aspect to it. And I was thinking a little bit about like, I want to put her in space. So it wasn't like a super deep beginning or anything, but yeah, her character started from there.
I mean, I think anytime you tack in space onto something, my interest level shoots way up. Most obscure sci-fi property. This is sort of an out of left field. Most obscure sci-fi property that you love, that you wish more people were into, so you could shout about it with them.
That's a really hard one.
I can go first while you think, because I have one all the time.
Go for it.
There was a show, I think it was on the Sci-Fi Channel, that was called The 4400. That was about people who had disappeared and they all suddenly reappeared, and they all ended up having like these special abilities, and it turned out like people from the future or something. Like, it was decidedly sci-fi. It was excellent. And like, I feel like I'm the only one who ever watched it. So I'm always like, the 4400? And people are like, what? And I'm like, oh, damn.
That's great. See, I don't have a ton in mind for this, but one that does pop into my head is The Abyss Surrounds Us by Emily Skrutsky.
Yeah.
It was her first book, I think. And it's like pirates and sea monsters, a world that is flooded by climate change. And it's got a lot of really cool elements in it. And it's really well written. And I don't think a lot of people have heard about it. So it's one that I definitely recommend when I can.
Nice. Quick reminder to everybody who is watching, if you have any questions for Claire, you can drop them in the Q&A box, and you can also just drop them in the chat if you guys would like to. And yeah, I've still got a few more things here. Let me see. We've covered some of this. Okay, so what is next for you writing wise? There's kind of some of the wrap up questions before we move on to anything from the audience, but like, what's next for you writing wise?
I have a few projects in the works. One of them that I finished a sequel to City of Shattered Light recently. It is an option book currently, so it will depend on whether my publisher wants it, but I was finishing up my edits for it, and I could not get the characters in the world out of my head, and I've had ideas swirling for the sequel for the longest time. So it's like, I have to do it just for me, get out of my system. So I should hopefully be sending that to my agent really soon. And then I also have 2 adult projects. One of them is a really bizarre dark fantasy, and the other one is, it's got some kind of cyberpunk post-apocalyptic vibes, found family going on, but monster hunting. It's a lot of fun.
Nice. Yes, I love any like cyberpunk. Yes, I'm very excited. And obviously, I will be keeping all of my fingers and toes crossed for that sequel, because you kind of left us hanging at the end of City of Shattered Light. And I'm gonna need more. So yeah,
consider it like a Marvel end credits scene.
I know you like, did. You totally did. You did a post-credits scene. Brutal.
What about you?
I just looked back at I was gonna look back and all my projects would be back there. No, those 2 Thronebreakers just came out, and I'm working on a contemporary science fantasy. I'm very slowly working on a YA contemporary science fantasy. I like to mash stuff up. I like to just take science fiction and fantasy and like get weird with it. So we'll see how that goes with young adult publishing. But yeah,
who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? Hi, Samantha.
Hello.
Hi. We have a couple of questions from the audience.
Yay.
So the first one is from Bill Bloom. Hi, Bill. Without any spoilers, how far into writing the book did you know the ending that you were aiming for?
Well, that's hard because there's a few different elements that so the very, very ending, the epilogue, I always knew that was going to be there. I knew from even before I finished the first draft in the brainstorming phase, I knew that there was going to be a big piece of the ongoing story. I'm trying to do this as non-spoiler as possible. There's going to be a big thing, and it's going to have to be in the second book if I get around to writing this ever. So I know that a big thing is going to happen at the climax of the story. But there was another piece that I wasn't sure how it was going to play out, and it was the fate of there's fate of one of the big bads and another character. I wasn't quite sure how that was going to end up or how I was going to wrap that up until I got there. And when I did, it was like everything clicked into place, and then I had to go back and like foreshadow it more and piece it all together. So it's a process. It always is for me.
Awesome. We have a question from Katie. What was your favorite part about writing / the process of writing this book?
I really liked dreaming up all the character interactions. I have so many pages and pages of interactions and scenes that probably will never make it into any of the stories as long as I keep writing them, but they're there to help me conceptualize and write the characters. But it's so much fun building characters in that way and thinking of these little interactions and transcribing them. And I think that's really where the heart of the story comes from.
Awesome. I like this question. This is from Sarah Rollins, and they would like to know, will you ever cosplay your own characters?
I've gotten that question before. I probably won't cosplay my main characters at the very least, because I'm always leery of stuff seeming self-inserty, and I want my characters to have elements of me in them, but also feel distinct from me. So I do have 2 of my friends who've cosplayed Riven so far, and they've done an amazing job. So yeah, on my Instagram, you can find at least one of them because she graciously let me post a few of them, and they've done a really good job. Oh, and Katie put the link in there.
Bud Lewis asks, who is your dream cast for the main crew? Netflix or Hulu original series? ?
Oh my goodness. That's also a really good question. And I feel bad saying that I don't actually have actors in mind for it, because I always dream about it having an animated, I dream about it being animated. I don't quite have voice actors in mind yet, but I watch shows like Altered Carbon had a spin-off movie called Resleeved. I think it's on Netflix, and it's got this like CG animation that's really smooth and really vibrant. And I kept imagining that as like, ooh, that would be so cool to see my work translated into something like that. So something that's crisp and a little bit anime-esque, I think would be great. But it's really hard for me to put real people's faces to my characters.
All right. Are you 2 ready for a little game called This or That?
Yeah. There's a shoulder wiggle. I love it.
All right. Everybody wants to know, would you rather see the future or change the past? Becca, how about you go first on this one?
Oh, man. I don't want to know my fate, so I don't know that I want to see the future, but I would like... There are some people who maybe should never have gotten past baby stage from history. I'm Liz Hitler. I'm talking about Hitler. Yeah. Go back and kill baby Hitler. Done. Change the past.
The obvious answer.
Yeah. That's what you do if you can time travel.
Perfect. Claire, how about you?
I would love to see the future. Not my future, because that would be weird, and it would probably send me into all sorts of weird psychotic spirals. But I would love to see the future of like human civilization and technology, and what like entertainment is going to look like, what cities are going to look like. It might be depressing because of climate change and all that, but I'm just really curious, and I would love to see it.
Awesome. All right, Claire, you're going to take this one. Time machine or magic wand?
I feel like that's a sci-fi versus fantasy question. I think it depends on what the magic wand can do. I think that magical powers would be great, because time travel is something that I can't really fathom of, and I can't think of any good use for it as far as like things that I could do effectively. I don't know. Yeah, anyway, magic wand for me.
Awesome. Becca?
Yeah, I think even though I just said yes, go back into the past and baby Hitler, but I think I actually would go with them because I feel like if you start messing with time, that is like it never ends well. So I probably would still go with the magic wand because yeah, I think once you start jumping in and out of a time machine, you're gonna make some problems.
Ren's still in
Awesome.
chat. She's mad at me right now.
All right. I gotta decide these. Hero or anti-hero, Becca?
I want to say, I personally love anti-heroes. That's me. Would I be an anti-hero? No, I was a rule follower through and through. I am maybe a little too lawful good. But I prefer anti-heroes because I think they're more interesting and imperfect and messy.
Nice.
Your answer is pretty much mine to a T.
Nice.
Yeah,
same way.
Absolutely. I think anti-heroes are really interesting to read and think about, right? Because they tend to be a little bit more complicated on the page, whereas I don't know, hero, lawful good.
It's difficult.
Theory,
it's difficult to make like a hero interesting. Like Superman has never really sort of been my thing.
Exactly.
That being said, Captain America and how they worked with him in the MCU, I was like, okay, this, maybe it was just Chris Evans, actually. Maybe it was just Chris Evans. But like
that's very possible.
Like it's difficult, I think, to take somebody who's extremely squeaky clean and like make him interesting or her interesting or them interesting.
I do not disagree with either of those. All right. And then now I have some rapid fire questions. This one, I like these questions. They're just fun. Claire, you can have dinner with 3 people, dead or alive. Who are they?
Oh my goodness. I can't, I'm wary, but like, I don't want to say people that I might potentially be speaking to in the future. Brandon Sanderson has been an inspiration to me as a writer since like the beginning. I run into him at a few signings and a few conventions. He's super cool. I think that he is extremely talented as far as world building, and his books are mind blowing. 2 more. Oh my goodness. My brain is just going to lock up right now. Do you want to go first? Do you want to go next, Becca?
Yeah, well, yes. Oh God, this one always drives me nuts. Actually, I think what I would do, and I don't have names because I've never done like an ancestry thing, but I would want to pick like 3 women from way back in my ancestry line, like preferably before they came over to the US, and be all like, please tell me your stories. Can you do it in English? By the way, I don't speak German or Swedish, but like that would be very cool if I could get it and have a translator. And sort of hear those stories about what it was like to live when they lived.
That's a really good one.
I like that. Claire, we can come back to
it. Okay. I'll let you know if I think of anything for it.
All right. Claire, what food do you eat too much of?
Fruit snacks.
Oh,
snacks are amazing.
I know. All right, Rebecca. Becca, how about you?
Chocolate. Yeah, I just eat too much chocolate. If it's in my house, I eat it. My kids don't get it.
I asked that question once and someone said chickpeas. I'm like, what?
Huh.
She's like, yeah, I eat them in salads and fried and all these things. And I was like, I barely ever eat a chickpea. I'm like,
my older sister would be that way. She's like, I eat healthy snacks. And I'm like, I am a trash raccoon. I'll eat whatever.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Snacks are amazing.
Claire, what is your biggest pet peeve?
Pet peeve. I'm trying to think.
Man.
Oh God. Yeah, this is a really difficult one.
What is my biggest pet peeve?
Like, there's nothing that immediately comes to mind, and then it's like,
do you have a hidden talent? So that question, people ask that question all the time. I'm like, that's such a great question because you never know who has a hidden talent. Most people don't have hidden talents. Fun fact.
I think most
of
my talents are I don't know. I think most people know about my talents.
Yeah.
I actually have one. I can sing and I'm actually pretty good at it, but I hate singing in front of people, so I never do it. Like my kids hear me sing, my spouse hears me sing, but that's it.
I'll throw that in the ring as well. My kids only hear me sing. My husband's heard me sing, but in front of people, why is that so terrifying? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I used to do hip hop dance, so that might help.
Nice. That's amazing.
That is cool.
That is super cool.
I'll take that.
Yes.
That works. Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I hope you had fun and were able to pick up your copy of The City of Shattered Light. Like I said, there's signed copies at Schuler Books and Nicola's Books. You can order them all online. There was a link in the chat for you to do that. I'm going to thank Becca for moderating and Claire for joining us this evening.
Yay! You should also buy Becca's book because they're really good. They have like some of the best voice I've encountered in YA. They're very snarky, they're funny, and they're cinematic, as they said earlier. So, yeah, you guys should order their books from Schuler Q.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you both. I had a wonderful time listening to your conversation, and I know everyone else did too. I'll clap for you since you can't hear anybody else's.
Yay. Congrats,
And
Claire.
Thank you.
Woohoo!
Thank you so
Happy
much.
book birthday.
Happy
And hopefully next
birthday.
time we see all of you, it will be back in person.
I will come up to Michigan. It'll be amazing.
We would love it.
I'm holding you to
All
that
right.
now.
Yes.
All right. Everyone have a wonderful evening and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much. Good night.